We often imagine gladiators as nothing more than killers, men who lived for blood. But what if this picture is not true? What if behind the helmets and scars, there were human stories full of hope, pain, and dreams? Tonight, we walk into their world. Not just the sand of the arena, but the silence before and the lives beyond. But this was only the beginning of their journey. Behind every chain and contract lay a path that would shape both body and spirit. Movies show us roaring crowds, blades flashing, blood in the sand. But few know where these warriors came from. Some were prisoners of war, others were criminals, and some chose this life. Why? For freedom, for fame, or for survival. The truth is stranger than the legend. Gladiators were not just slaves. They stood on a strange border between shame and honor. Despised as lowly, yet worshipped as heroes. They could win freedom or die nameless. In this world, one man's fall was another's entertainment. But their lives outside the sand held secrets. Lives that history rarely shows us. If you enjoy stepping into forgotten worlds, make sure to subscribe so we can walk together through more stories hidden in time. Because next, we enter the heart of the gladiators' training, a world of sweat, pain, and discipline. Do you wonder how they prepared for the arena? The Ludus, the gladiator school, was not a place of comfort. Every morning, before the sun warmed the stone walls, men were already at work. They lifted heavy stones, swung wooden swords, and practiced the same movements again and again. Their diet was simple but powerful: beans, barley, and bread. The body was shaped like iron, and pain became a daily companion. But this was not only about strength, it was about discipline. To survive in the arena, a man had to train his mind as well as his body. Every strike, every block, every step was part of a pattern that could mean life or death. The Ludus was not a home, but a forge, where men were hammered into weapons. Inside the Ludus, men lived side by side. They trained together. They ate together. They bled together. Some became like brothers, bound by a shared struggle. Others became rivals, their eyes burning with quiet hatred. For in the arena, a friend today could be an enemy tomorrow. The trainers kept strict order. The lanista, the master of the school, watched with sharp eyes. He gave rewards to the best and punishments to the weak. The gladiator school was a place of rules, where loyalty and betrayal walked hand in hand. It was a strange family, one made of both trust and fear. For many gladiators, the dream of freedom was the fire that kept them alive. Victory in the arena could bring rewards, money, gifts, and even the wooden sword of manumission. That sword meant liberty, a chance to walk free under the Roman sun. Some gladiators became heroes to the crowd. their names shouted in the streets. But freedom was not promised to all. Most died before they could taste it. Still, hope lived in every heart. Each strike in training, each drop of sweat on the sand, was also a step toward a brighter tomorrow. And so they endured, waiting for the day when chains might break, and their names might live beyond the arena. Every gladiator school had trainers, often retired fighters who had survived the sand. They knew every trick, every strike, every mistake that could cost a man his life. They shouted, corrected, and punished, their voices echoing in the stone halls. The men they taught were not only students, but also investments, lives turned into weapons for profit. Yet some trainers were more than harsh voices. They were guides, shaping raw men into legends. A nod from such a teacher meant hope. It meant that maybe one day the crowd would roar your name instead of forgetting your face in the dust. The gladiators were called barley men because their diet was rich in barley and beans. Unlike the rich feasts of senators, their meals were simple but filling. Bread, porridge, and beans gave strength. Sometimes they drank a strange mixture of vinegar and ash, which they believed healed their bones. It was not luxury, but it was enough. A strong body could survive the blows of a sword or the crush of a shield. Food was fuel, nothing more, nothing less. And as they ate in silence, they knew each meal could be their last before the arena. In the Ludus, pain was not an enemy. It was a teacher. Bruises, cuts, and broken bones were part of the lesson. A man learned how much he could endure and how much it took to break him. Every scar was a reminder, not of weakness, but of survival. Some gave up, their spirits crushed before they even reached the arena. Others grew stronger, carrying their wounds like hidden armor. For in this world, pain was not the end. It was the road one had to walk if he ever hoped to stand tall under the gaze of Rome. Training did not end with wooden swords. Gladiators carried heavy shields and wore armor that pressed down on their shoulders like stone. They marched, turned, and fought while weighed down, learning how to move like flowing water beneath iron. To master the armor was to master survival. Every clang of metal, every scrape of shield against shield, reminded them of the battles to come. The Ludus rang with the music of iron, echoing like a warning bell. Step by step, they became not just men, but moving fortresses of flesh and steel. Even within the walls of the school, gladiators heard the echo of the crowd. Trainers reminded them, every move must please Rome. The people wanted courage, drama, and spectacle. It was not enough to fight well. they had to fight beautifully. In their minds, men rehearsed not only strikes, but gestures. A raised sword, a bold stance, a look of defiance. The arena was a stage, and Rome was watching. Each lesson was not only about life and death, but about performance before the empire. When training ended, silence filled the barracks. Men lay on wooden beds, their bodies aching, their minds restless. Some whispered prayers to forgotten gods. Others stared at the ceiling, dreaming of freedom or fearing the arena that waited. The night was a strange companion. It carried both peace and dread. And in the quiet darkness, every gladiator wondered the same thing. Would tomorrow bring him closer to glory or to death? In every strike of practice, there was a shadow. Death waited at the edge of every movement. Gladiators knew their lives balanced on the smallest mistake. A missed block, a slow step. Even in training, some men fell, never to rise again. This was the truth of the Ludus. It was both a school and a grave. Each day tested not only strength, but the will to face the fear that lived in every heart. To train here was to live beside death, and to learn its silent language. Even before stepping into the arena, some gladiators became known. Crowds gathered near the schools, hoping to glimpse their favorite fighters. Whispers spread through the city, stories of strength, of courage, of men who might soon stand before the emperor himself. These warriors lived in both shadow and spotlight, and though their lives were harsh, the thought of being remembered gave them strength. If these stories surprise you, leave a like, so more people can walk with us through these forgotten worlds. For even here, in the silence of the Ludus, echoes of fame were already beginning to rise. The gladiator school was a prison and a stage, a place of discipline and dreams. But beyond its walls lay another life, a world of citizens, families, and voices in the streets. Some gladiators were feared there, some were admired, and some found love, even under the shadow of the arena. But how did Rome truly see these men? Were they only tools of entertainment? Or could they rise above the sand and live as something more? That is the story we now follow, beyond the walls of training, into the heart of society. When gladiators walked through the streets of Rome, eyes followed them. Some looked with fear, seeing only killers. Others stared with awe, whispering their names like those of heroes. For many, gladiators were both admired and despised, figures of fascination, yet reminders of death. In the markets and taverns, stories spread like fire. Women spoke of their courage. Men argued about their strength. Children played at being gladiators with sticks. In this way, the fighters lived two lives, one in the sand and one in the hearts of the people. Their love was fragile, like a candle in the wind. Every meeting was stolen from the march of time, every embrace a rebellion against fate. It was proof that even under the shadow of death, the heart still sought warmth and light. Some gladiators found love even in lives marked by blood. There are stories of women leaving gifts at the gates of the schools, writing letters, or whispering prayers for their safety. Some even dared to marry these men, despite their low status in Roman law. For love sees beyond chains and scars. It finds the man behind the sword. And in rare moments, gladiators became not just warriors, but husbands and fathers. Their families carried both pride and fear, knowing that tomorrow's fight could steal away everything. Fame brought gifts, but also danger. Some gladiators became wealthy from prizes and the favor of powerful patrons. They wore fine clothes outside the arena, drank good wine, and even owned servants. Yet this wealth was fragile. One defeat, one unlucky day, and it could vanish into the dust. Still, the dream of rising from chains to luxury burned bright. It gave hope to those who trained, and pride to those who triumphed. But it also drew envy and hatred from those who saw gladiators as less than men. The price of fame was heavy, as sharp as any sword. The people of Rome could not decide how to see gladiators. To some, they were slaves, cursed and unworthy of honor. To others, they were champions who carried courage where ordinary men could not. In the amphitheater, cheers mixed with jeers, love mixed with hate. This contradiction shaped every step a gladiator took. He was a hero and an outcast, a star and a shadow. This was the strange place he occupied in society, never fully trusted, yet never ignored. And in this uneasy balance, gladiators found their place beyond the arena. Some gladiators carried a hidden life, families that waited for them beyond the walls of Rome. Wives, children, and parents who lived with quiet fear, never sure if their loved one would return. These families rarely showed their pride in public, for society did not honor such bonds. But behind closed doors, love spoke in whispers. A child's laugh, a wife's prayer, an embrace before dawn. These were the treasures a gladiator carried into the sand, hidden beneath armor and scars. In the roar of the crowd, they thought of the silence of home. Yet, even as gold glittered on their robes, the chains of the arena clung invisibly. The sound of the crowd was never far, reminding them that all fortune flowed from blood and sand. In Rome, illusions could shine brighter than truth, but they shattered just as easily. Not all gladiators lived in poverty. Some, after many victories, earned great rewards. They bought fine cloaks, dined in Roman taverns, and walked with the pride of men who had tasted success. To the crowd, they looked almost like nobles, but this wealth was fragile, like sand in the wind. The moment the crowd turned away or the sword found its mark, it was gone. Gladiators lived in a fragile dream, one strike from glory, one strike from ruin. In this way, even riches could not free them from the shadow of the arena. Beyond gifts and whispers, the city itself demanded a price. Every bond of loyalty was tested in the open streets of Rome. Some gladiators caught the eye of wealthy patrons. These powerful men and women offered gifts, protection, and even influence. A gladiator with a patron could rise higher, living in comfort while others suffered in chains. But this favor came at a cost: loyalty and sometimes silence. Friendship with the powerful was both shield and chain. It could lift a man to riches or pull him into danger. In Rome, every gift carried weight, and every friend could become a master. This was another stage gladiators had to walk, outside the arena. Fame and wealth brought not only admiration, but envy. Other gladiators, still trapped in poverty, looked with bitter eyes at those who rose higher. Even in the barracks, whispers spread like fire. Jealousy was a wound that never healed. This envy could turn brother against brother, ally against ally. In the arena, rivalry was expected. But in the quiet of the school, it grew darker. A gladiator's greatest enemy was not always his opponent in the sand, but the resentment of those who lived beside him. The amphitheater was not the only stage. In the streets of Rome, gladiators sometimes faced insults, challenges, or even brawls. Their fame followed them everywhere, turning each step into another battle. Some citizens tested their strength with words, others with fists. For these men, the world itself became an arena. Every corner, every market, every tavern was a place where their reputation was measured. It was not only the sand of the Colosseum that demanded courage, but the very life of the city itself. In the taverns and markets, people spoke of gladiators as if they were legends. Songs were sung, poems were written, and whispers carried their names across Rome. Some were remembered with love, others with fear, but all became part of the living story of the city. Yet the voice of the people was dangerous. It could raise a man to the skies one day and drag him into the dust the next. Gladiators walked on the edge of this praise, never knowing when it would turn into scorn. Their fame was a wave, powerful but never still. Behind the armor, behind the titles and the fear, there was always a human heart. These men laughed, loved, worried, and prayed just like anyone else. Their stories remind us that even in the harshest lives, humanity shines through. If you feel this human side of history deserves to be remembered, leave a like or share this video. Every gesture helps us keep alive the voices of those long forgotten. For in the end, gladiators were not only warriors, but men searching for meaning in a world of blood and stone. The silence before battle was as important as the fight itself. For it was in the quiet shadows that a man discovered who he truly was. Beyond the cheers and the whispers, Beyond the coins and the scars lay something deeper. A gladiator's life was also filled with silence. The silence before the fight, the silence of fear, the silence of dreams. It was here, in the quiet corners of their hearts, that the truest battles were fought. How did they face the night before combat? What hopes and fears burned in their minds as they walked toward the arena gates? That is where we now journey, into the inner world of the gladiator's soul. The night before, the games was filled with silence. Some gladiators prayed to the gods, offering coins or food to unseen powers. Others sharpened their blades, their hands steady but their hearts unquiet. Each man carried his own ritual, a way to prepare for the unknown. Fear was a shadow in every corner. Even the strongest warrior could not escape it. Yet in that fear there was also hope. The hope that tomorrow might bring victory, freedom, or simply another sunrise. The night was a battlefield of the mind, fought in whispers and dreams. Before entering the arena, men touched charms, kissed amulets, or whispered words only they could hear. Some smeared dust on their skin as protection. Others carried small tokens from loved ones, hidden beneath armor. These rituals gave them strength against the terror waiting in the sand. Superstition walked hand in hand with courage. It was not the steel alone that carried them forward, but belief in gods, in fate, or in their own will. For a man who faced death, even the smallest symbol could feel like a shield against the darkness. When the gates opened, the world became a roar. The sun poured down, blinding after the dimness of the cells. The sand stretched out like a golden sea, and the crowd rose like a living wall of sound. Each gladiator took his first step, heart pounding against the weight of armor. In that moment, fear and courage became one. Every eye in Rome watched. Every heartbeat was louder than the crowd. The first step into the light was the beginning of a battle, not only with an opponent, but with fate itself. When the first strike came, time slowed. The sound of blades clashing was louder than the roar of the crowd. Every breath became precious, every heartbeat a reminder of life and death. For gladiators, the arena was not just a place of spectacle, it was the edge of existence. Each wound carried pain, but also knowledge. A cut on the arm, a bruise on the chest, taught lessons that no teacher could give. And still, in the midst of blood and dust, a man could find a strange kind of peace. The peace of giving everything he had, with nothing held back. Above the sand, thousands of voices rose as one. The crowd cheered for courage, hissed at weakness, and cried for blood. Every movement was judged, every stumble remembered. To the gladiators, these voices were as powerful as the blades in their hands. For sometimes, life or death depended not on skill, but on the will of the crowd. A raised hand, a shouted demand, could shape the fate of a man. And in that deafening storm of voices, a gladiator had to stand tall, even when fear clawed at his heart. Not every fight ended in death. Some gladiators survived again and again, carrying scars like trophies. Each survival was a victory not only of strength, but of will. The taste of air after battle, the weight of life when death had passed. It was sweeter than wine. These survivors became legends, their names written on the lips of the people. To live another day was to defy fate itself, and each time they walked back through the gates, they carried proof that courage could outlast fear. Not all left the arena alive. For every man who survived, another fell into the dust. Some were forgotten, their names lost in the roar of the crowd, but others were honored, their courage remembered in songs and carvings. Death was never far, but in Rome, even the fallen could live on. The memory of a brave fighter gave strength to the people, and though his body was gone, his spirit walked in the whispers of the city, a ghost carried by every cheer that still echoed in the air. Some gladiators were lucky enough to retire. They left the sand behind and took up new lives as guards, trainers, or even free citizens. Their scars became stories, their survival a mark of honor. In these rare cases, the arena gave not only fear, but a second chance at life. If stories like these move you, consider subscribing. Each voice we share keeps alive the memory of those who fought, not only with swords, but with hope. For every scar was also a step toward freedom, and every life carried echoes beyond the arena walls. The people remembered their heroes, not only for victory, but for courage. A gladiator's legacy was not measured by how many he killed, but by how bravely he stood. Rome saw in them a mirror of its own spirit: strength, resilience, and the will to face fate without fear. And so their names lived on, whispered in streets, carved into stone, and carried in the hearts of the crowd. From the silence of their cells to the roar of the amphitheater, the legacy of courage still walked in Rome, a fire that never truly died. Even after the battles ended, the memory of gladiators lived on in Rome. Children played their games, imitating the brave poses they had seen. Merchants used their names to sell trinkets. Poets wrote lines of triumph and tragedy, keeping their spirits alive in words. The city itself carried their echo, in songs, in carvings, in whispers that filled the air long after the crowd had gone. To live as a gladiator was to live forever in the memory of Rome, whether in glory or in grief. If you want to uncover more hidden worlds, subscribe now and walk with me again tomorrow night. Together, we'll keep alive the voices that time tried to silence. The lives of gladiators remind us of something timeless. They faced fear, carried hope, and sought freedom, just as we do in our own ways today. Their battles may be far behind us, but the feelings remain the same. If you believe these voices from the past still matter, consider subscribing. Together, we can keep these stories alive, walking again through the dust and torchlight of forgotten worlds. For in every gladiator's story, we find a reflection of ourselves. The stories of these men did not end with Rome. Their courage, their struggles, their voices still walk through time, finding new life in books, paintings, and films. The gladiator remains with us, both myth and memory, both shadow and flame. So what do we carry forward from their lives? Why do we still dream of them today? That is where our journey now turns, from the dust of Rome into the echoes of modernity. Today, gladiators live again in films, games, and stories. We see them on the silver screen, their battles painted in fire and blood. But often, the truth is lost, replaced by legend. The man behind the helmet is forgotten, while the spectacle remains. Yet, even these portrayals show something real. They prove that we are still drawn to these figures, to their struggle, to their courage, to their hope. The gladiator has never left us. He walks beside us, even now, in every story told anew. The gladiators teach us that even in chains, a man can carry dignity, that even in fear, he can stand tall, and that even in the shadow of death, he can still dream of freedom. Their lives, harsh and short, still burn with lessons for us today. In every challenge we face, we echo their struggle. In every step of courage, we walk the same road. The story of the gladiator is not only Rome's story, it is the story of humanity itself. If you have walked this far into the echoes of history, consider subscribing. Each step keeps alive the voices of those who once stood in the sand. Your presence here turns silence into memory, and memory into story. Leave a like, share your thoughts, and join me again in the quiet. Together, we will keep walking through the torchlight, into the forgotten corners of the past. And so, the gladiators return to silence. The sand settles, the torches fade, and the crowd's voice becomes only an echo. But their stories remain, drifting across time, alive in every heart that remembers. Sleep well, traveler of the past. May your dreams walk gently, like footsteps in ancient dust. And may the echoes of Rome guide you softly into the night.